what's up guys, let's take a look at another CodeWars exercise. This one's called Sort the Columns of a CSV file. Imagine we've got a table with names on the top, and underneath each one is data associated with that name. Maybe it's their score, maybe it's their currency, maybe it's how many times they've logged on. I don't know. And we're going to rearrange those columns based on the name so that the stuff under each one gets dragged along and stays with it. So Stefan Vogel was on the right, he's still on the right, and everything under him is unchanged. But this one, Densil, which has 3907 and 48, got moved all the way to the left because that name is first alphabetically, and still has 3907 and 48. We got to keep that connected. Now our data doesn't look like this, it's not visually as nice. It looks more like this, where you have everything squished together with semicolons. This format is called CSV, comma, separated value, but it's not always comma. I think semicolon is the European standard, which is nice because semicolons are less likely to appear in the data, because if you have a comma separating and a comma inside, it's a little bit tricky. Now, with stuff like this, I write the nice code that I wish I could have, and then I make it happen. So don't get too worried at first about all the little details. I say, what do I want to do? And then how do I set that up? Let's say, for example, I want to sort the columns by their heading. That's what I want to do. And I know that doesn't work yet. If I hit run, it's going to say, hey, we don't have anything called columns. But having that gives us a target. It says, hey, this is the climax of our story. We got to do the rising action, and maybe a little afterwards to, put it in the right format. But this is the thing we're going for. And now we exactly know what to define, because we've got things called columns and headings, so we know we have to put columns equals and heading equals. So how can we do those? Well, heading is the top of the column. If you imagine a column, we're going to have the top and the middle and the end in that order, I assume. So let's say we're going to take a column and we're going to give you the first thing, which is the name, not case sensitive. So you could put dot lower, but I am slightly worried. I said this was a European standard, and seeing a name like Stefan Vogel, I wonder if we're going to see accent marks or the German double S character, and sometimes those don't work with upper and lower. Luckily, Python has a method called casefold, which does handle that stuff. It's great. Putting this might not matter, but now I know it definitely doesn't matter. I can stop worrying about it. So let's test it out. I want to show you what I mean. Let's say we'll print the heading of some imaginary column with name and 1, 2, 3. So if I say print that, it gives us the name, it drops the rest. Exactly. Okay, so what's a column? Well, now we got to look at the data, or at least think about the data. And unfortunately, there's one thing I didn't mention. This is a pretty version where it's lined up, but this is also a pretty version. It's not quite as raw as it may imply, because our thing is not really 3 lines. It's one massive string that has these guys in it, the new line character or the line feed character, and so we can't assume it's 3 things. We have to break it up into those 3 things before we break up the semicolons. In fact, I'm going to make a new function just for that, because when I talk about the columns, I want to have clean data instead of all this ugly stuff. So let's call it decode. And then at the end, guess what? We're going to encode back into that format. And all the stuff we're doing is in the middle. So let's say decode equals, it's going to take a CSV, and it's going to say, okay, we're going to pop off the CSV dot, what is it called? Split on this thing, but there's actually a method called split lines, so why not? And then we're going to split each part on the the semicolons. So I'm going to go line.split for line in that stuff. Okay. And put some parentheses. Let's print it out to see if we're on the right track. So we're going to go decode of this guy. And then we'll see how it looks. Beautiful. We got this stuff. It's nice and separate. Each line is a list, and inside the list are the, the items, the things that are separated by the semicolons. And then at the end, we're going to have to put that back together. So let's say, we'll call it data. And we're going to join twice instead of split twice to put it back the other way. By the way, once we have this, we're basically done. It's one of those situations where you set up all the parts and then you realize, oh, there is no main event. We've already got it done. So let's say, okay, data, we're going to join each line based on the parts, so put semicolons in between them, and then we're going to join all the lines together with the new line. So we're going to go something dot join line for line in what? Data. I don't know why I came up with that name. And then we go dot join around the whole thing. See if that works. How are we going to test this? Well, we'll just encode and decode and have them cancel each other out and see if it does, see if it gets back to the beginning. So let's say print encode of decode of whatever. Haha. So there you go. We have successfully achieved nothing. We've successfully gone into one form and then back to the original, which is what we need to do. We just have to change something in between, right? So luckily, now we never have to talk about these ugly strings again. When I write one or two more lines to finish this off, I don't have to worry about semicolons or anything. It's already good. So what are we going to do here? Well, we're going to return this thing, but there's one more step, because in Python and in most programming languages, when you get something that's lines or rows or two-dimensional, it's not really even. It's not like you can treat the horizontal and the vertical equally, because what you get is something like that. When we make a tic-tac-toe game, we make a row, and then we have another row and another row, and the rows are real. The rows are like a genuine thing. You can grab one, you can move within one, you can shuffle one, whatever. But the columns are not real. Like jumping from 1 to 4 is jumping out of a row into another row, completely breaking the rules, So if we want to get a column, we don't have it. We have to rotate this thing, or the math term is transpose, which I know is not the same as rotate, but you get the idea. So I'm going to make a transpose. I know all we're doing is making little baby functions here, because this is taking some data and putting it through a bunch of steps. So why not define each step one at a time? So what we're going to do here is transpose the data, do some stuff, rows or columns, and then switch it back so the columns are rows. So we're going to say transpose equals lambda. The math term would be matrix, and I'm going with math on this thing, so maybe we'll stick with it. And then in Python, it's so wonderful. All you have to do is say zip star. So what that is let me go back. When you zip something, you line up the first of each, the second of each, the third of each, and that's named for a zipper. If you take two sides of a zipper, you take the beginning of each, the second tooth, are they called teeth, and then the third, and so on. So that's kind of like rotating it, even though it doesn't, visually rotate, and it doesn't actually make lists. It makes these iterator objects. It's what we need. So zip star is exactly what we need here. So anyway, now we can say, all right, we just call the functions we made. I'm going to rearrange this so that we have all these little guys. Now, lambda functions are exactly the same as functions made with def once you've defined them. So like if I said def decode, CSV, next line, blah, 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 return, that would work. But these are A, little baby functions. B, we might put them in the middle of something like here, and lambdas can do that, whereas def functions cannot. And finally, it's just convention. When you're looking at CodeWars, a lot of people use functions like this all the time, and so you want to follow. When in Rome, you want to do as the Romans do. If you're working for a boss who says, "I hate lambda functions. We never want to use them unless they're anonymous inside of another expression," then you do that. It's no problem. So we're going to say, all right, we're going to decode CSV file content, and then we're going to transpose that to get the columns. And then we're going to sort them, and then retranspose it, and then encode it back. This is what I mean when I say that, like, you set up all the little parts and then just hit the first domino and bada bing, bada boom. I think this is going to work. I haven't tested it, but let's give it a shot. Hey, look at that. We passed the tests. Do we think this is going to be the shortest? No, I think it's pretty reasonable. And I'm going to hit attempt, and I'm going to submit to make this my official submission. Once you do that, you can see solutions. Here's one. I gave him an upvote earlier when I saw this, because this is exactly the same as what we're doing, just worded slightly differently. But using zip star to rotate, we're splitting on. Now this is really genius. I really like what this person did here, which is, hey, maybe we're not separating on semicolons. Maybe it's a comma this time, or maybe it's a vertical pipe bar character. And maybe it's not ending with a new line. Maybe it's, I think there's one called /r. I don't actually know what it is, but it's some kind of old symbol from a typewriter style input. And this person put them in the parameters, which is just wonderful, because if you call the function by default, it uses those, but if you say, hey, this time it's going to be different, you can make it different. So that's really great. I admire that quite a bit. And then sorted columns is sorting them by the exact same style that we did, except case fold instead of lower. And then we join, bada bing, bada boom. So this is literally the same steps that we wrote, different names. I kind of like ours where you define each step, but I really like this. I should take this in the future and use that idea. Here's another one where everything is squished into one long expression. That's kind of cool. But guess what? It's exactly the same as what we did. It's not like a whole new flowchart of steps. It's the same steps. This one looks nice because it's, hey, each step, nice small thing, do it, move on, label it. This is probably the best way to learn if you look at this and you see, okay, he did this, lock it in, move on. Oyster shucker, good job, sir or madam. This one is pretty cool. We import the CSV, which, okay, I didn't mention, but CSVs can be dangerous if you just split on commas. What if there's a comma inside of one of the cells of the spreadsheet, and then it's totally thrown off. You've split differently. And the CSV reader method handles that. It can intelligently look and say how many columns are we targeting, and is this inside of quotes, and things like that. So we were safe. There was no username that had a semicolon. Maybe there would have been if we ran the random test a bunch of times. but it's definitely something you'd use in the real world. And then this is kind of cool, the string IO. I believe what they're doing is like, okay, so in Python when you have a string and then you add another character on the end, it doesn't just keep it and add, it makes a whole new string. So if you're dealing with really big data and you've got a string and you're adding more onto it, it copies the whole thing every time, and that could be pretty inefficient. So I've never used the string IO, but I believe what this person is doing is making a buffer and like building onto this one thing and then writing it once instead of using a bunch of memory and being kind of wasteful. But what are we doing here? We're using the CSV reader, which says, hey, we're going to peel off the parts with the delimiter that you give it, which this person called sep. And sep is a commonly used abbreviation for separator, so no problem there. People would understand that. Now, this is really nice. Header is our first spot, and then star calls is all the ones beyond, and so this is called destructuring. Very nice. You sort it. They use case fold. I love them. Their heart is in the right place. And then you're writing it. They're not really writing it to a file, but the string IO, pretends like it is, and it makes a string object instead of a something.csv. So this is a really cool problem because it's kind of annoying, and whenever something's annoying, you have to go through steps to manage that annoyingness. And you get to see what other people did, and a lot of these had good ideas that we'll use in the future. Thanks.